Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisey, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. We're excited to have Dylan Pugh join us, a master in the intersection of sports, media and digital innovation. As the managing director of the renowned sports industry group, Dylan steers the helm of initiatives like the globally recognised Sports Industry Awards and Sports Industry Next Gen, showcasing his prowess in elevating the sports sector's profile. His entrepreneurial spirit is evident from his tenure as the founder of Pomodo, a sports podcast publisher, a leading podcast monetization strategies at music giant Spotify. Dylan's rich history, from a professional rugby player to a key player in digital media and advertising, reflects a journey of diverse experiences and insights. His roles have spanned from global agency lead, managing multi-million-dollar partnerships, to pioneering in-game advertising sales. Dylan's expertise promises to be invaluable, with strategies and stories for standing out in today's competitive job market. Join us as we delve into Dylan's approach to recruitment, talent strategy, and the digital transformation of the sports industry. Dylan, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Great to be here.
Good, great. Well, let's get cracking. We ask this to every one of our guests, as you know. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and do you have any lessons learned?
Yeah, it's varied, really. You know, I haven't been through a huge amount of interviewing for a huge amount of jobs myself. Like, a lot of the jobs I've had have been, through relationships rather than me, applying for jobs and going through the full application. And I've actually found that, I'm sure we'll get into this, some of the best hires I've had have also been when, not through the traditional means of people applying and going through the interview process. For me, it's a lot about relationships and personality, and like some of the intangible things like, energy and chemistry and those kinds of things. And I guess when I reflect back on not just my own sort of applying for things, but also we've done a lot of hiring over the last few years. And I guess in terms of lessons, there's a few different things. One, a lesson for the applicant is the importance of the personal statement, in my opinion. Like when I look at various applications now, obviously, most people, I presume, a standard, you ask for a CV and a personal statement. And it just amazes me sometimes how, lazy the personal statement can be. If I get, obviously, some people send a personal statement that have another job name in it, or the wrong name of company, which clearly that's like a basic error, which you think that's a schoolboy error. But even if it's just a generic personal statement, I'm like, do they really want this job, or are we just one of hundreds that they're blasting this out to? So a really good personal statement that's tailored to the job that I'm hiring for, where someone actually tells me exactly why they're good for the job we're looking for, I think there's so much value in that. And I think that's something that I don't know whether people take it lightly or not, but I see so many applications that don't have that done well. And I think that is the number one thing that I look for when I'm sort of, filtering through applications all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're not the first person to say that, actually. And question for you, have you had anything that's come through that has really stood out on that personal statement, cover letter, however that is, and by doing it slightly differently? There's so many different ways of doing it nowadays in terms of slightly more creative ways, video, audio, whatever that might be. I suppose, what's the best one you've seen, if you can remember it, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the best thing is just something short, sharp, like bullet points and punchy. I don't want an essay, and I don't care if it's written in a nice sort of narrative. For me, it's just like, boom. You're going through so many applications that if I can, within 15, 20 seconds, I can see, right, 3 or 4 points as to why this person is worth speaking to. That's it for me. I mean, if someone's done the effort of going through a video and stuff, I mean, sometimes can I be bothered to watch a video or listen to audio? I mean, goes back to the whole voice notes I get from WhatsApp. I'm like, nah, sorry, I'm not investing the time to do that. But at least that person has gone to the effort of doing that. So I would really appreciate that thought. But for me, something short, sharp, punchy, bullet points, to the point, that would be the best way of doing it.
And just going back into what you said earlier about where chemistry is arguably quite critical for job selection. What advice would you give to candidates who are looking to get out there, going through the traditional recruitment process? Obviously, standout CVs, standout cover letters, imagining sort of kind of networking and all that sort of jazz. But you obviously came from a professional sports background into the sport industry. How relevant to you is obviously chemistry is critical, but the experience that someone historically has, or do you sort of look for the bigger package of what they could bring to you?
Yeah, look, ultimately, they need to have the right skills you're looking for, whether it's technical skills or the right experience. They need to have that. And another kind of learning that I've come across is I hate going to an interview process where you're repeating yourself. Like say if you're meeting 5 different people in the interviews and you're just having the same chat 5 times, it's a complete waste of time. So when we're hiring now, I try to make sure that, right, if there's 3 interviews, right, what are you asking? What are you asking? What are you asking? And these aren't so much prescribed questions, but right, I'll say, you're really going to probe on the technical skills. Like, do they have the right experience and the skill set to do the actual job? And then I will probe about behaviors, values, culture, and all that kind of stuff, rather than just getting them to tell me their life story, which they've already said 3 times before to somebody else, And in terms of advice for applicants, obviously it's hard within a CV and personal statement. Obviously, this only really comes in once you're having a conversation, but just be themselves, really. I mean, sometimes it's hard because they're going to be nervous, and I do understand that people will be nervous in an interview. And to your point about coming from a sort of sport background, one thing that I've learned, not just from an interview perspective, but in general with business, is to not be intimidated by really senior people. Obviously, there's a respect, but not to be like shit scared of someone who's really senior on paper. As I was a youngster going into a professional rugby environment where I was 18 coming from school, and there'd be people there who had played for the Lions, won World Cups, who were in their like 30s, and they would treat me the same as everybody else. And I was just one of the team, not a young kid that they would treat me with like different layers and barriers and stuff. So there wasn't that sort of hierarchy. And I'm sure that does exist in business. But from those days, I've never been sort of starstruck, awestruck, or nervous talking to people who I think, various levels above me, so to speak, in the hierarchy of the business world. So just like ignore that bit and try and be yourself and let your personality shine through.
Is that the sort of approach that you obviously take through your whole career as such? Obviously, you were young, going in with some fairly impressive individuals who didn't look down on you and sort of treated you with mutual respect, if you will. Is that your leadership vibe moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. Even when I was younger coming through, again, this isn't an arrogance thing at all. And, you do have the respect for the elders, etc. But I was sort of never intimidated. But also, now that I'm in a more sort of senior leadership position, you're exactly right. I don't want people to think that I'm out of reach. And I do my best to treat everyone the same, no matter how junior or wherever they are in their career journey.
And do you think you look for that slightly more in the people that you are interviewing and hiring, in the sense that that's the experience that you had and that's the personality and the character of the people that you're hiring? You want that to be everyone wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to say that they're going to be a leader, but actually you've got that experience of saying, I can identify when you're, as you say, shit scared or they're nervous, and that's understandable in an interview process. But is that something in terms of a person's or a candidate's personality trait that is quite important to you when you're hiring? Is that ability to, I suppose, absorb pressure as much as anything else?
Yeah, that's definitely one thing. One of the intangible things that I always try and look for is like good energy. I still don't really know what that means, to be honest with you, but like it's one of the most important things for me in people generally, but also when hiring. Like if this person's got good energy about them, and it's hard to explain what I actually mean by that, but it's one of the most important things that I go by. And sometimes it's just a hunch, sometimes it's just a gut feeling about someone. Again, this is assuming that they have the technical ability to do the actual job and they've got the right experience. We went through a hiring process recently where we narrowed it down to 6 people on the second interview stage. And I was confident they would all be able to do the job. Like we had 6 really good people. Each one of them could have done the job. So then it comes down to those sort of intangibles of culture, energy, values, etc. But yeah, that's definitely something and that's what I come in. I didn't really grill them too much on their technical ability, but I really try to get that out of them. And sometimes I feel like I would like some form of training on that side, because I don't really have like prescriptive questions to get this out of them. To be honest, I'm kind of winging it a lot of the times. And I just feel like as I'm doing more of this, I'm thinking, shit, I should be a bit more prescribed about this and a bit more focused and structured. Because I do feel like I'm just like winging it and having a conversation and trying to get that feel. But I do sometimes think that, and I've said this, with my team as well, with the HR team, that it might be worth, the senior leadership team of the business going through some form of training course to try to be a bit more structured in getting those behaviours out of people.
But do you not think there's an element of a sort of natural charm that actually you don't want to be sort of too professional in this field as the interviewer?
Yeah, you're probably right.
You go with the good energy and you have that chemistry that they can do the job, that you can actually just then build on it, and you can have a beer with them on a Thursday night.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, maybe the sort of the more ad hoc approach kind of works. Sometimes I just go with the flow. And if you click with someone and you've got that good energy, then you kind of go in all sorts of different directions. And I think, Christ, how did I get there? But then at least you show that, you've got that connection with someone.
It's clear that you've got whether this is conscious or not, you've got a process of CV, cover letter, which is the technical side of things. That then gets you through into the interview, as it were, which is then focused slightly more on the cultural value, personality trait side of things. If there were a way of flipping that a little bit and actually going, well, okay, we can assess character, values, etc. up front, and therefore actually potentially bring in somebody that might not necessarily have exactly the right technical skills, but they can be taught. But what they do is bring in exactly the right values that we're looking for and exactly the right culture we're looking for. Would that be something you'd look at, or something that you'd be interested in? Or do you still think that it is, technical skills first, values second, and then we go from there?
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe you're about to tell me that there's some tech that exists that can sort of find all those factors out from someone, from paper or digitally rather than actually in person. But yeah, that would be super interesting to see. Like, ultimately, I do think that people need to have the technical ability to do the job. It depends on the job, obviously. If it's sort of a sales job, then obviously that's transferable across industries. You don't have to have experience of selling that precise thing. If it's a fairly junior job, then obviously they can be developed and they can learn the skills necessary. But yeah, obviously the blend of the two is preferred, but thus far it's that last bit of the personality and the values is the hardest thing to figure out, and also I guess as I thought was the thing that you'd have to be in person with someone to find that out. But if you can get a bit of an indication of that up front, then obviously that would be a big bonus.
And just going back to the 6 candidates that you had in the process recently, and also what you've talked about historically and conversations we've had historically with other senior leaders, do you ever in the process go for a left of field character that you can compare again to ensure that you don't have the same conversations that you're having with the other 5? Do you ever chuck in a wild card, or is it quite regimented in your process?
We don't really chuck in a wild card to the interview stage. We're very clear in that we want as diverse a split as possible across the candidates that we're actually going to be interviewing. So, within that makes sure that we're not just interviewing 5 of the same types of people with the same background, same experience. And the diversity comes in multiple forms, not just through, gender, ethnicity, background. So yeah, that is something that we try to make sure that we're interviewing a few different people. But yeah, it seemed to work this time. The people we interviewed, even though the 5 or 6 of them were really good, they weren't all from exactly the same space. So we could pick and choose a bit more from that, which is good.
Good. I want to take a slight pivot here and chat about Spotify. What is or have there been any differences, or what big differences between hiring in the more kind of music, digital entertainment space compared to sport? And if there have been, do you know why that might be?
Yes. So Firstly, we got a lot of applicants for all the jobs at Spotify, but I think that's probably just because it was, a cool, newish tech company on the up, and it was a cool place to work. So people wanted to work there. So we got a lot of applicants. And also having an in-house team really helped with that because it just, made the process a lot easier for us. Yeah, I mean, coming into the sport world, interestingly, we've had a lot more applicants for our jobs in the last, say, 3 months than we had this time last year. Now, I don't know whether that's a good thing in that more people want to work for us or more people want to work in sport in general, or whether it's a bad thing for society in that more people are looking for work. I'm not sure. You could look at it in both ways. But I do think we've had a challenge on the diversity front, on the hiring. And the more senior you go, the more challenging that is. That was less of a problem in somewhere like Spotify, where we'd get a much broader pool of people applying for the job with the right skill sets. I find here we get a lot of diverse applications, but unfortunately, a lot of, without generalizing too much here, the more senior you go, the harder it is to find people with the right skill set and experience that allows us to diversify the makeup of the team. Whereas it was a lot easier in an industry like Spotify.
And just comparing sport with the music, when you were at Spotify, and I know obviously the technical skills were critical, but did you have to come from a music background or music media background to be looked at Spotify, or were you sort of a bit?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I mean, it depends what job you're doing. If you're
Yeah.
going there in, let's say, the artist relations team, then you would need that. But if you're going in the marketing team or the ad sales team, for example, then no, you don't. I guess in the interview process, you'd always ask, are they interested in music? So I think that's important that they have an interest in music. For me, to be honest with you, I was never really like a big music fan. When they asked me that, I said, yeah, I love a sing-song on a Saturday night. And a bit of karaoke. Yeah. And when they asked me who my favourite artist was, I said Tom Jones, of course.
Of course you did, yeah.
Hardly like the cool up-and-coming artist they probably hear from other people. But yeah, so no is the answer. Many people we hired didn't come from the music world at all, or, weren't, like obviously you need to have an interest in music, but no, we were hiring from elsewhere.
Touching on something you mentioned just a minute ago around having an increase in applications at the moment for jobs that you've got on. Sports Industry Group, obviously have your ear to the ground. You know a lot of what's going on from a kind of macro perspective in the industry. Have you heard from other senior leaders, other organisations that that's the case, that there's a lot more people in the job market potentially than the opportunities on offer? Or what are the trends, or have you heard of any trends that are kind of coming out from the wider sports industry?
I think in general, more people want to work in sports business. I think the business of sport has become a lot more mainstream. It's not just about the people who work in the industry. If you look at the football side of things, people are obsessed by ownership and, the ownership of United, Chelsea, Man City. Like, these stories are mainstream stories. The most popular stories that we have that come from Google, as opposed to, say, the Daily Newsletter, are stories related to Jim Radcliffe or, when Chelsea take over. And that's just regular fans of that club who are now a lot more interested in the business of the club and football in general versus even rugby now as well. The people, regular fans, are a lot more interested in the business side of the sport these days. And I think because of that, a lot more younger people are interested to work in sports. So I think that is a factor as to, why not just us, but, more people want to work in sport in general.
And apart from the obvious experience you get within sport, Dan and I have spoken a lot about how there's a lot of talent outside of sport that could bring huge amount of skill sets into sport. Do you see that sort of kind of transforming, and how do you, because obviously starting out in sport, the wages wouldn't be as good as the city or property or whatever it might be. How do you see a sort of correlation to make it really attractive to get the best talent in the marketing pool, if you will, to come and play in sport to really drive it forward?
Well, it's a good point you made that the salaries aren't as good as in other sectors. But, it's a cool place to work. If you're interested in a sport, or if you have a passion for a particular team or a sport, to get to work within that sport and for that team, for example, it's a hugely attractive thing. And then I guess for the individual, they need to weigh up the lifestyle versus career, how important is the salary, what the career path is. And, I think we'll always have enough talented people working in this industry. I guess what we really need is, at the very top level, making sure that the sharpest business minds are the ones running the sports, not, doing other things in the financial district.
Yeah, I think that's the critical piece, really. And there's a lot of commentators out there that say that there is potentially issues with talent at the very top in terms of where they've traditionally come from and the route they've taken. And I think I kind of ultimately call it a privileged tax to work in sport. And actually, when you get to that level, you're in charge of a multi-million pound business. And I think that's where the mindset is shifting slowly with the influx of capital coming in from various different states. But ultimately, it has to be business focused, not just this is my favorite sport and therefore I'm kind of going to be the custodian of it anymore. There has to be a bit more business rigor behind it. But there are challenges to that as well, which we'd be here for hours talking about.
Yeah, I think one of the other factors as well is there isn't so much scope for big bonuses in sport or equity either.
Equity is the key one, I think. Yeah.
In other industries, it's really attractive to be able to get a chunky bonus now and again, if you're performing well. And also just having equity, no matter how small it is, just makes people so much more motivated, invested in that particular business. But I just don't think sport is sort of set up to allow things like that to happen as much.
I completely agree. Dylan, you've been absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough for your time. We do finish each one of these with 3 questions. Make them as long or as short as you like. But the first one is your most frustrating thing about recruitment.
For me, it's both the time to filter through all the applications, but also then the cost to outsource that process to an external organization. Like having had the luxury we spoke about earlier, the luxury of working for a company like Spotify, where we have an in-house team that knows the business inside out. You have a good relationship with, they're in the same office, and they can do a competent job of filtering and giving you a list of candidates. That was a luxury. Now coming out of that, and either having to, it's not cheap to outsource, and having to swallow that on your P&L, or when sometimes you haven't budgeted for it, but obviously someone leaves, that's unexpected, or then taking the hit yourself to filter through all applicants. It's really time consuming. So that's probably the most frustrating thing for me on the job side.
And I'd be really interested to hear what your answer to this is, but your best hire and why.
So my best hire is quite a funny story. So we run the Sports Podcast Awards as well. And we were looking for someone sort of relatively young to come in and help out on a kind of internship type thing. And we thought we'd look at someone who'd entered the awards. So I won't say the person's name, but we saw someone who'd entered the awards and I thought, this person looks quite interesting. I might try and look that person up on social media. So I thought I found that person on social media and then realized I'd come across the profile of somebody else that had the exact same name. And I thought, oh shit, this isn't the right person. And just before I moved off to find the person I was looking for, I thought, oh God, this guy actually looks really interesting. He kind of had all the backgrounds that we were looking for at the time. And I thought, geez, this is exactly the person we're looking for. So I DM'd him and he jumped on a call. He obviously didn't know it was going to be a job interview. And then 3 weeks later, he did a 1 week tester with us, and he ended up working with us for like 18 months, 2 years. So, that, and go back to what I said earlier, he didn't apply for the job, but he had the required skill set, I thought, on paper. And then from one conversation, we clicked, we gelled, he showed the right, good energy, good values. And I thought, right, we're taking this guy on, and he became a really strong asset to us. And it's, just so fluky that I was looking for somebody that had the same name as him, but another person. And he ended up getting a job from it. So that's probably the best hire for me.
So it certainly is the best hiring story, a random stalk.
It's very random, isn't it?
Results in a great employee. And then last but not least, one thing you'd change about the recruitment world. increased random stalks or?
Yeah, exactly. Just stalking people on social media. I struggled with this one when you send it through in advance. I think I'd love to see how AI is going to help stuff. Like, we've tried to get AI to jazz up our job descriptions. And we speak a lot internally about, should our job descriptions be a lot more innovative, different, better? Should it be video? Should it be this? Should it be that? But then I think, well, ultimately, when I'm looking, I have looked for jobs. It's usually on LinkedIn, and really, all I want is like the bullet points of what the job roles and responsibilities is. So we often toy about, well, do we need? Should we want to jazz up the job description and make it a bit cooler, sexier, or do we just want the core information written down on paper that's easier to digest? So I'm not saying that is definitely something I'd like to change, but I'm keen to sort of explore whether we should be changing that or not. And also, I wonder whether, again, CVs, personal statements, video, audio, you mentioned it earlier. Personally, I kind of just want the information as short and sharp and snappy as possible. But, can there be some innovations there? Can the process be made easier, simpler? Can AI help in some shape or form through that? I'm intrigued to see how that goes.
Awesome. Well, Dylan, you've been absolutely fantastic. I know I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I'm sure you have as well, Dan.
Great. All the best. Really enjoyed it, and good luck with everything.